Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm excited to discuss our 2026 service management trends and predictions and provide you with some food for thought to drive better outcomes for your organization throughout the year. First, let's start with some introductions. I'm Erin Phillips, VP of Marketing here at ISOS Technology, and joining me is a panel of ISOS and Atlassian experts who are very eager to share their thoughts. First, we have Nick Sarfeld, our Director of Client Solutions, Nick Nader, one of our Senior Solutions Engineers, and Graham Moore from Atlassian, a Senior Partner Solutions Architect. So thanks everybody for being here. Um, I want to start by setting the stage for 2026 and why this is going to be a pivotal year. Uh, Service management has evolved by leaps and bounds since ITIL debuted. Notice we aren't even using the term ITSM here. We're saying service management. So we've expanded to a broader understanding of service management across an organization into ESM, enterprise service management. And that's bringing the value of some of those service management best practices to business teams, to leadership. And I know we're going to talk about more of that today. You also have growing complexity in all aspects of work, from the technology that people are using to business processes, security compliance, and even economic market pressure, things like that. The world and work just keep getting more complex. And then we definitely want to consider maturity, both of service management frameworks like ITIL that I mentioned, and then there's maturity within each organization that's implemented service management practices or perhaps has scaled and is interested in deepening some of what they're doing. So that's a big factor when we're talking about service management as well, is the maturity of that organization. And with that, I want to dive into some of our trends. Trend number one, ITSM expanding into ESM. So, as I mentioned, IT service management. We are expanding that definition and the application of service management principles to the enterprise. Mr. Nick Nader, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge expansion opportunity for most of our clients, right? As everyone kind of starts their JSM journey at IT support. Their IT support team lives in Jira Service Management. It supports their internal employees or their customers or both. And now we're seeing more and more organizations start to expand to other departments within their organization, right? So human resources, finances, facilities, operations, all of these other teams that tend to have some kind of part in their onboarding and offboarding of their employees' workflows or touch some of their customer support requests that are coming in through their IT help desk. So we're starting to see a shift from that kind of isolated IT team that lives within Jira Service Management to a broader, more holistic enterprise service management implementation of Jira Service Management and the service collection that now it includes customer service management and Jira Service Management and assets and some of these robo agents that tie everything together, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about a little later within the webinar. But yeah, we're seeing more and more of that across our clients, and there's a lot of opportunity to make sure that those teams work together in a streamlined fashion. So when you are onboarding a new employee, you've got all of those onboarding components that span across those departments. So HR's involvement, finance, getting an account within your financing tool for that employee, that employee getting provisioned hardware and software, all this stuff touches several departments within the organization. So you really need an implementation of the tool that takes all of that into consideration.
Well, and you know, I don't want to wrap everything around AI, and we're going to talk about AI a little later, but there's an AI component here where, you know, ESM has been sort of on the verge of taking off for a while now. All of these non-technical teams have a process or they use a tool or they don't. Maybe it's just email and spreadsheets, which is not all, as uncommon as you'd want it to be. Um, but if you're going to want to improve those processes or have better visibility, for those teams that aren't in a tool, like most of the business teams that would fall into ESM, um, you want to use AI to help speed up those processes or fix some of those processes or reduce the manual intervention that's required. And the only way to do that is to bring them into the fold, into a tool that gives you that ability. So like while the prediction, of ESM has maybe been there for a while or it's been expanding for a while, I think from a Rovo perspective, from just a general AI perspective, that's sort of the biggest move going into next year is the only way to have a massive impact on those teams and their processes being more efficient is to pull them into a tool where those features and functionality are available. And in this case, you know, JSM makes Rovo available. So let's get them into JSM and then they can use, AI tools to optimize their processes. And Graham, it's great having you here because I mean, your focus at Atlassian around solutions is primarily around the service collection, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, as the first Nick mentioned, the service collection has three apps in it now. We've got Assets, JSM, and the new Customer Service Management. And Rovo agents, as you said, underline all of that. So yeah, I think to evangelize Atlassian and JSM and the service collection as a whole a little bit, I think that the shift that we have with service management at the moment, and it's still an ongoing thing, is that it doesn't just live in IT. Again, as the first Nick mentioned, we're bringing shared visibility across all departments. So your HR, your facilities, legal, finance, etc., can all collaborate and deliver services in a unified way. And that's the purpose of JSM, and obviously powered by the teamwork graph behind the scenes. And I think at the center of that transformation, we're positioning JSM as that hub for every team in the organization. And so that means that any team that provides a service, whether it's onboarding new employees, whether it's managing facilities requests, handling procurement, they can all use the same platform with the transparency and efficiency that JSM offers. And obviously, the result of that is that everyone's going to get that clear view of what's happening. Requests don't fall through the cracks. Teams can work together seamlessly, deliver a better experience for their employees and the customers. And so overall, it's unifying your organization on a single platform. That's really the key thing here. And another plug for Atlassian and JSM specifically is that Forrester just 2 or 3 weeks ago announced us as a leader in the ESM space. So you're in really good hands with our product as well.
Yeah, and that's been a trend over the last couple of years, right? Getting much better in those quadrants.
Yeah.
And if we had to have like a 1A to this trend, I think it would be the customer service management or module that is going to be sort of the focus or uh, play a big part in next year. And I think it's on the next slide. But the difference between, JSM or ITSM purposes or even ESM, like that is mostly internal, right? That is a lot to do with how you're handling onboarding, offboarding from an HR perspective, or how you're receiving incidents or support requests internally. The customer service side of the house, though, is different when you're dealing with external customers, right? And historically, JSM has always been able to support it, but I think now moving into next year, there's going to be a bigger push into being able to handle that from an enterprise perspective, and be able to more closely focus on your external customers as much as you do on your internal users.
Can we flip over to that slide to see the comparison? And that kind of shows, built on the Atlassian platform with Rovo, Teamwork Graph, automation, all security, all underlying that. You're sharing service management technology, queues, SLAs, channels, forms, reports. And then there's, specific purposes for Jira service management and customer service management, which gives more business units the opportunity to take advantage of some of these things. I also wanted to chime in. Someone said non-technical teams, and I don't think there's any team at any organization now that can be non-technical. So I would argue that maybe it's business teams or teams outside of IT, but our marketing team is highly technical. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the new CSM app, it's heavily built on Rovo. And so like the primary purpose of the external portal that CSM has is that you can chat with AI initially, and it links back to knowledge content and Confluence. And so the richer context you have in your knowledge content, the better that AI is going to perform on the front end for your customers. And so, deflecting tickets and faster responses for your customers or suppliers, partners, etc., whoever's using CSM externally is going to be really beneficial.
Talked to
Yeah.
two clients recently in regards to that specifically, which is like, how do we have an a AI agent out there on our customer portal, helping our clients either fill out request forms or answering questions, based off of that context, that knowledge that we have from the knowledge base. And currently, like the out of the box Rovo agents don't have a customer facing, like templated Rovo agent built out. So we're having conversations with those clients about how we can like custom build one for their process, fill out dynamic forms for their end users and, essentially just completely streamline the user experience for their entire customer base because they don't like trying to find the right form or they don't like filling out a dynamic form themselves. So definitely something where Rovo agents are going to play a huge part to help those customers and all those people that are averse to actually utilizing your service catalog.
Yeah, 100%. I do it daily. I have conversations in Slack with our Rovo app, and that does everything for me.
Yeah. So this, I think the point of all of this is that moving beyond IT teams, it really opens up a lot of opportunity within the rest of your organization to help you achieve some of those business outcomes that you're looking for that require collaboration across departments, require more people to be involved than IT support. So, our key takeaway for this is connect with a business unit stakeholder. I, HR, marketing, facilities, finance, operations, somebody outside of IT and dev, and start understanding some of their use cases. How are they managing service requests or requests of any kind today? And that can kind of help you build the case about how consolidating onto JSM could align with their goals and help improve some of those outcomes for those teams as well. Okay, moving on to our second trend, AI automation and predictive operations. This time we will start with Nick Sommerfeld.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you've listened, we've been talking about AI before we even got here. So, this is the biggest piece of going into 2026, not just for Atlassian or for you specifically. It is for everyone. AI is in everything. Most SaaS tools you use are going to have their own version of something. Um, from the Atlassian perspective, our prediction, and it's more of a trend, like we've talked about, is the continuation of Rovo within the stack, its features and abilities. But basically, the prediction or the trend is it's going to make its way everywhere. If you're not using some sort of AI tool to make your processes better, alter your workflows to include, um, in this case, Rovo agents, but maybe any other um, AI functionality within your processes. Um, even Forge, as an example, can leverage external AI tooling, can leverage Rovo. Um, so it's going to work its way into everything. Um, and you're gonna see a lot more automation, a lot more. How do I stop doing these repetitive daily tasks, and how do I automate them? And historically, you would automate them with, some code, right? Do this, do that. Very basic, maybe conditional logic. But now you can turn that into an actual critical thinking automation, right? You can use a robo agent, you can use other AI tools to make sure that the right decisions are being made in an automated sequence. So I think we're just going to see a lot more automation, a lot more processes that include AI. And then the next piece of that, everyone's going to be saying, okay, we're doing this, we've got it plugged in. Now, what does that mean from a predictive standpoint? And that's the tricky bit that we'll talk about.
Yeah, and that's kind of the piece that I want to double click on, right? Because the predict and prevent and like that shift to the proactive side of service enablement is something that I've been looking forward to for a long time, right? When I first started at ISOS as a solution partner for Atlassian, they had just acquired Opsgenie, and Opsgenie was this magical tool that integrated with all of your monitoring systems and consumed a bunch of data that all of these monitoring systems are like generating out of your applications that they monitor and you support, and they kind of just aggregate into this alert hub that Opsgenie has super complex policies and routing and alerting that essentially is going to boil down to, hey, you should pay attention to this alert coming from your monitoring tool, right? And generate an incident out of it. And that's like the old school, that's the current way that we do predictive service enablement, right? Is we expect an incident to be reported against because we see the monitoring data coming out of our monitoring tools. And so the prediction here is that AI is going to be really good at consuming all of that data and tying into your operations teams and saying, you guys are going to have an incident coming up because Datadog gave me this information that makes it look like your application is about to have some downtime or is going to run into a conflict or an error or something like that, right? So it's going to be able to predict when those things are going to surface before your end users or your customers run into it on your applications. And it's going to be able to create that incident. And as it learns over time how you guys resolve those incidents, it's going to be able to suggest resolution paths, take some of the automated actions that you would do anyways as part of that resolution path, and get you guys part of the way to that resolution before a human has even gotten involved in that kind of incident, right? So it can be some really cool stuff because AI is so good at like aggregating and analyzing and creating decisions and like finding trends and insights out of all of this data and noise that's coming from like operations monitoring tools. So that's kind of the coolest part that I'm looking forward to. There's some other, predictive and preventative things that it can do that aren't operations focused, but I think that one's the most fun that I'm anticipating.
Well, and I think you know, I don't, everyone is talking about AI and they're just talking about AI in general and making general statements of we need this because it's going to do that. And that is always geared towards making something better or faster. And unfortunately, that's like as far as it gets. There's not a lot of critical thought about, okay, we're going to bring these tools in and how are we going to make them work or why are we going to make them work? How are, the people, how are people and processes going to work best with it? Um, and so, because we're talking so much about AI, I do want to make sure that we're talking about best practices as well around some of this stuff. Um, what's not defining what's not working is probably your first step before figuring out what AI or how you want to make AI work for you. Um, like I said, there are so many options. We or my team daily probably work with 5 or 6 different AI tools, depending on what SaaS tool we're using at any given point. So, the question is always, which tool do we use? Which AI tool do we use? Um, and that's a tough decision to make. It's not, a knee-jerk reaction. It's not, hey, I want to make this one AI tool work for everything. Um, if the data wherever the data is housed, that's probably the tool you want to use, right? Rovo is purpose built to work with the Atlassian data set better than any other AI tool you're going to hook up, right? Um, and so you just want to make sure that you're thinking about where you're making these changes, where you're pushing or pulling AI into your processes, and making sure it's the right AI, whether it's Rovo or ChatGPT or Gemini or any of the other ones. Where you're doing the work is where you want the AI to be used. Um, and interestingly enough, I think, like I mentioned before, so Rovo being built in, that doesn't mean you can't use others. Forge is a very nice way to connect and use other AI tools to take action within your Atlassian stack. Um, but the key takeaway, and Graham, I'm curious because Rovo lives, you know, it lives within the Atlassian stack, but it does play a big role in JSM in the service collection. Um, my biggest takeaways or our biggest takeaways are like just find maybe five, and that's what we've got here. But what are five repetitive processes, and how do you think AI or automation can streamline them? Um, Maybe don't try it. Think about it. Figure out, is it the right thing to do? But from your perspective, Graham, when you're talking about Rovo and how it's working from a JSM perspective, like what are you telling folks to take away?
Yeah, I think first off, I'd like to just quickly touch on I think AI in general is on a maturity journey, but I think also in service management, it's very obvious. We touched on some use cases before of like the first stage of maturity, which is like reactive automation. And so, like AI can handle those repetitive tasks for you. And we already do that in JSM, right? So Rovo can handle some of those repetitive tasks for you. And it can apply standard fixes. Like you can build all of that currently through automation. I think next after that we have what we call predictive intelligence. And that's where AI is going to kind of learn from your data to prevent incidents, for example, before they occur. Or if it's facilities, it can prevent something breaking, one of your assets breaking, by scheduling preventative maintenance on it and things like that. And so it's kind of like the stage that we're starting to lean into more now. Is thinking about what are some of those use cases, not just in IT, but also in the business, where we can leverage Rovo and JSM to help those teams to basically enable them to focus on more high value work than what they're doing currently. And I'd say the final stage of the maturity journey, which we're not there yet, I think maybe next 3, 4, 5 years, maybe we'll get there, is the autonomous operations. And that's kind of like the ideal state where AI detects, it diagnoses, and then it resolves issues completely independently. And so your teams can then focus on innovation and instead of the firefighting on the mundane, repetitive requests that land on their plate each day. So I think, yeah, in terms of uh, some of the current use cases that we have. I know that internally here for change enablement, for example, we have built a robo agent that I think is available to partners to implement too if they want to, but it will triage a change request so that you can determine the level of risk. So it's going to plug into your assets, it's going to plug into the data that's on the change request itself, and then you can use automation to push that through approval processes. And then if you've got Bitbucket or pipelines, whatever else plugged into it, it can automate some of that deployment. So you can really lean on Rovo to step into scenarios like that and use automation behind the scenes to just take a flow from beginning to end without any human interacting with it.
That's
Yeah, and like that
amazing.
that's another takeaway real quick, and like a maybe a cautionary trend for this year is as you dive headfirst into AI, you might be doing it at a maturity level that is too low. Like you may not be mature enough for how deep you're diving in. If your data is not clean, um, you may be able to automate some processes and things like that, but to have it think and return clear for you is going to be entirely dependent upon your data. Um, so if you're not looking at your data, you're not looking to clean up, any data sets that you have in the Atlassian stack or in other tools, you're going to have a hard time getting the results that you're looking for. And I think a lot of companies are going to fall into that in 2026.
Yeah, definitely. It all comes back to data cleanliness, right? I think there are a lot of cool, good points made. We're seeing some really cool, innovative stuff. So the next trend I want to talk about is like, where is all this happening? Because it's not in your systems of old. And so we have to talk about cloud because that's where the advantages are coming in collaboration across teams and taking advantage of AI. And cloud is evolving as well. And so enabling some of this new and innovative, some of these new and innovative service management practices. Uh, Nader, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, for sure. So the thought here is essentially all of our clients have so many cloud platforms now, and as all of the teams within their organization become technical teams, like technical marketing teams that Aaron mentioned before, everyone is going to have platforms that they live in, that they do their work in, that they track their work in, that they track their resources in, and it's going to be disparate and it's going to be messy at the get-go because you have preferences across your different departments, and it takes a long time to consolidate on a single platform, and no single platform is gonna meet all of the organization's needs. So you tend to have a lot of these like tech sprawls across the organization where you have a bunch of different platforms from a bunch of different vendors that you tend to have to manage within the cloud, right? So this trend is essentially predicting that people are going to have to start learning how to build a governance framework to manage that kind of multi-cloud sprawl, make sure it's all integrated together, like make sure that you have like it says, unified governance across those, but also like unified data reporting, where you can aggregate all of that data in one place. So we're going to start to see a push towards figuring out how all of these things connect, and how we manage them in a governance structure, and how we do that seamlessly so that there isn't a bunch of friction between these tools, or isolated and siloed data or information in these different platforms. Atlassian has a couple of aspects of their platform that help with this. Things on the enterprise license, like data lake and analytics, is a huge one because it can connect all of your Atlassian tools, but also external data sources so that you can get that centralized reporting, and it, like it says, visibility across kind of all of those products. AI and Rovo obviously plays a huge part in this as well, because you can connect Rovo to obviously not only all the Atlassian products, but a lot of these external platforms that store data, like SharePoint and Google Drive and all of these other places that are data repositories and like sources of knowledge within your organization. Giving AI access to all of that makes it really smart. It makes it way more contextualized for your organization, and therefore you can get a lot more value out of its answers, or its custom agents that have a customized purpose that you've structured within a prompt or instructions for that agent. So a lot of different tools can be used for this multi-cloud management. And then on top of that, you obviously want some governance model so that you're not overpaying on licenses. The user interface and experience is very structured, and it's really easy to onboard new employees to the different platforms that they actually truly need access to with the right level of access to those different platforms. So there's obviously a lot that goes into managing a bunch of these cloud deployments, and you can ask any IT team within a large enterprise organization, like how much work goes into kind of governing all of that, and making it easy for their organization to manage all of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't really have that much more to add. I mean, maybe just the takeaway here, and not to wrap everything again in AI, but that's what's going to drive a lot of this here as well, right? You're going to want to figure out and assess your multi-cloud strategy, because as organizations take steps towards enterprise search models, the expectation that the data is going to be available at their fingertips through that enterprise search, which is a function of AI and grabbing all the data, pulling it down in, into a central place, or at least being able to query and search against that data, which is going to require AI. You have to understand this strategy. You have to make sure that everything's connected. And if you don't, I think you're not gonna be able to use AI effectively, and you're not going to be bringing all of your data together, obviously. So, yeah,
Yeah, I think you're, as we get into multi-cloud, AI, more teams, your silos are going to get even more complicated and messier if you don't have your data silos, your team silos. If people can't talk to each other in a consistent way or be able to pull data and see it, there's always this trade-off between flexibility for how teams work and standardization. And so I think that's one of the big things if you really want to take advantage of AI, large scale data, like there have to be some parameters in place to make it usable for the organization. Okay, next trend, moving on. Cybersecurity and GRC. So this is a big one, especially when we talk about AI and security and compliance and all of that. Uh, Nick Summerfeld, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to bring this in to this conversation because it's something that I think is underserviced in the Atlassian ecosystem, and not from a functionality perspective, but I think from a solution perspective. So we, ISOs, the Royal I, have done um, this type of implementation before. Uh, and it's that consolidation of tech stack. It's the can we do what we're doing in a purpose-built SaaS tool that is very rigid, very expensive, and only a small group uses, and can we bring that into the larger tech stack within Atlassian, um, and do the same thing? And most of the time, the answer is yes. Like there may be some considerations and concessions, or there's definitely some ramp up time and configuration and build considerations. But I've seen this more as of late, and I expect this to continue into next year, where you're leveraging assets, you're leveraging JSM, Rovo, um, Jira, and Confluence, all of it basically to house and track your governance, risk, and compliance. So all the audits that are required, from a daily, monthly, yearly perspective, running those through Jira or JSM, they have approval processes, there's an audit trail. They relate back to the different frameworks that you build in assets as a database. Um, so this is more of just, look, we've been doing this a bunch as of late, and I think this is going to continue into next year. And it's something that is pretty underserved on the marketplace, either from an app perspective, or just from a clearly defined functionality perspective. But it can completely be done within Atlassian.
Awesome. So our takeaway for this, do you want to talk to this, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is to understand from your InfoSec team, from your IT team, whoever's running your governance, risk, and compliance, or whatever version of that you're doing. Understand what they're doing, what tool they're doing it in. Is it something that you could bring into the Atlassian stack, either from a tool consolidation perspective or just from a sanity perspective? Maybe they aren't using a tool, and maybe it's very painful to do audits, every quarter, for all of the different processes that they have. As you go through different frameworks, SOC or NIST or some others, like what are the steps? How does it work? What are the things that they're auditing? Engage with them, ask them, because it's most likely something that can be brought in.
Thank you. I love how all of our takeaways are go talk to someone in your organization because that's how these things have to start. Go find out what someone's doing today. What are their pain points and how can we figure out how to solve them together? Uh, okay, so for our final trend, certainly last but not least, we have Graham helping us out from Atlassian. Let's talk about outcome-based service models. And I love this because technology, a tool is a means to an end. What are you actually trying to achieve? And it's some sort of business outcome. So I think sometimes people get wrapped up in, ooh, AI for AI's sake, because if we're going to talk about AI, but like ultimately, what are you trying to accomplish with that? So please talk to us about outcomes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think let's start with the idea of doing more in one tool. We've talked about this a little bit already, but if you think back a few years, most teams they're using a patchwork of different apps. One for IT support, another for customer service, maybe a spreadsheet for assets, a separate tool for HR requests, and so on and so forth. And it gets messy. And I think honestly, it kind of just slows everybody down. Now, I think there's a real push to bring all of those workflows together. And with the service collection, as you can see here, is that you can handle your IT, your HR, facilities, marketing, etc., and external customer support now, all in a single place. And I think one thing I do want to call out is that Assets is also a platform app now. I think I got announced at Team EU. And so that's really beneficial, especially as you start to leverage Rovo. There's an EAP that's just been released for Rovo and Assets, where you can actually access some of your assets information through AI. And so we're talking about automating workflows. That's a perfect use case right there for Assets. And speaking of robo agents, a lot of that repetitive work, like triaging requests, answering common questions, all of that can be automated, and it can also be shared within other collaboration tools that you're currently using. So if you use Slack, you can have conversations with Rovo and your support team in Slack, whilst it's all is getting captured behind the scenes in JSM. And so the result of that is that your teams spend less time switching tools and more time helping people. One of our customers, they said, let's see, I've got it here. So service collection lets us centralize support, automate escalations, and gain real-time visibility, which means no more tool sprawl, just seamless service delivery. And I think that's the goal, right? Let's make it easy for teams to do their best work whilst minimizing that friction. And the second component here is connecting apps and data together. So it's not just about having everything in one place. It's about making sure that all of your tools and information actually talk to each other. And all of our collections at Atlassian, whether it's the teamwork collection or service collection, etc., they're all designed exactly for that. So they're not just bundles of apps. They're all deeply integrated with the teamwork graph, which is what ties absolutely everything together behind the scenes. So, if you're working on a tricky support ticket with the teamwork graph, you can instantly see the related assets, past incidents, knowledge base articles, and you can hand that off to dev teams in Jira. And Rovo agents can pull in context from across the platform too. So when someone asks an agent a question, the answer can be personalized and relevant to the person asking. And I think that connected approach means you're not just reacting to issues, and we touched on this earlier again, is that if anything, you're really anticipating them. And that's sort of the journey that we're on. So if an asset is due for maintenance, the system can flag it before it potentially causes a problem further down the line. Or if a customer has a history of repetitive issues, then your support agents can see that right away, and then they can tailor their response accordingly. We have another customer, and they had this quote. They said that the teamwork graph and Rovo AI turn disconnected data into actionable insights, powering smarter, faster service for every team. So, I think you touched on this before, Aaron, as well. So it's something you've probably heard us at Atlassian say a million times, but it really is about breaking down silos, making sure that everyone has the information they need when they need it. And the last component on that slide, I think, was highlighting how do we measure success. Previously and very typically in IT worlds, the teams are focused on metrics like the number of tickets closed or the average response time, your mean time to resolve. And those are great metrics to measure, but they don't always tell us the full story. There's a lot of nuance that can be missing in those numbers sometimes. And so what really matters is the outcome. As you touched on before again, Aaron, is that are your employees happy? Are customers getting what they need? Is the business running smoothly? And service collection helps teams shift their focus to these bigger picture goals. You've got dashboards, reports, Rovo. We touched on analytics earlier as well. And you can track things like your employee onboarding speed, your service uptime, your customer satisfaction, experience level agreements, which is kind of a newer thing in service management. And you can do all of that in real time. You can build your custom dashboards or even use robo agents that map directly to your business objectives, not just the operational stats. And so I think that's a huge shift, and it's helping organizations prove the value of their service teams, especially in a way that resonates to leadership. So I think, if we were to recap this, service management's moving more towards unified platforms. That's definitely Atlassian's focus. And it's especially for the benefit of having connected data and the ability to drive that outcome success. And the service collection, it's leading the way like that. I mentioned it earlier as well, the Forrester Wave, we just got recognized as an ESM leader. And so it helps customers of Atlassian do more in one tool. It helps teams connect their apps and their data, and it helps individuals focus on what really matters moving forward.
Thank you. This is great. It made me think, if you're doing this right, every team is a technical team and every team is a business team that's driving revenue in some way for your organization. And those are really the outcomes that, an organization is looking for. Regardless of what you're doing day to day, like that's the thing that's moving your company forward. So thank you all so much for being here with us today. This gives everyone, I think, a lot to think about on insights and kind of where service management is going. I have a few last takeaways for folks watching this recording. We would love to talk to you about any of the things that we covered in this webinar related to service management or Atlassian or not, if it's about business strategy. And so you can feel free to schedule an hour with us and talk to a strategic advisor, see how some of this might be affecting your business as we move into 2026, or book a Rovo demo. We talked a lot about AI today, and start exploring some ways that might be able to streamline, modernize, optimize, and eventually take action for you within your workflows. So again, we're here to help. Anything that we can do, if anything, sparked an interest or an idea, we'd love to have a conversation. And thanks again for your time.